Hey, Cypher here. With the government shutdown looming large in this week's news, perhaps it's time to get a little perspective on the history of this very strange American process. I'm putting this out quickly, so sorry for any haphazard editing. So most of you have probably been hearing a great deal about the government shutting down back in the 90s, but this phenomenon starts back in the 70s during Ford's and Carter's administrations. By the 80s it had become a frequent thing. So what is this particularly American process? In America, we may not understand this, but when other governments face budgetary issues that stop all pay, people just keep working in those countries. Of course, the problem with applying that point of view to our own democracy is that other democracies are typically parliamentary, so their executive and legislative branches are not fully separated. We are a liberal form of government, and in so being, the separation of powers cannot force one another to function. We are keeping some of the essential services going right now, but not everything is working properly, and we won't be able to keep everything indefinitely. Parks are closed, people are out of work, and it will get worse the longer it goes. We've gotten kind of used to not having to deal with shutdowns since the last one was in 1996, and it seems to have gone out of American memory. But America's memory is piss poor at best. So let's understand why this problem exists in the first place. In terms of US history, this is a relatively new thing. The government didn't function without a budget on numerous occasions, but shutdowns were not required. Due to a law enacted in 1884 called the Anti-Deficiency Act, department heads were able to spend money during these times. This worked quite well since we can't seem to pass budgets in time for their usage. Unfortunately, this law experienced a change in the 1970s. In 1976, President Ford vetoed a bill that was to fund the Department of Labor and the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, or HUE for short, citing the bill's extra pork expenditures as the reason for the veto. Ford used his veto and the lack of any budget extending the bill politically. He closed the two departments by executive order. The Congress, in response, overrode his veto, forcing Ford to reopen the departments, but not without having a few days without the Department of Labor and HUE. Under Carter's administration, there were 5 of these same partial shutdowns, but for different reasons. Interestingly enough, this happened during a supermajority of Democrats. The argument was between the House and the Senate over how far funding for abortion procedures should go, i.e. dangers to the mother in cases of rape or incest. These shutdowns became so commonplace that the Attorney General Benjamin Civiletti wrote a new opinion about the Anti-Deficiency Act, legitimizing the practice of shutdowns, which had no legal standing until then. When Reagan took the presidency, he had 8 full shutdowns. These never lasted more than 4 days, but they were commonplace enough to be problematic. Reagan had been elected making campaign promises about spending cuts, and he vetoed bills that did not meet him halfway. This was caused by Congress having different parties controlling the House and Senate, making them differ on what to cut and how far. The first shutdown was because of a veto, the second was because of passing the bill too late. This time around, nearly everybody working for the government got the days off because the government couldn't pay for them. Even groups like the FBI and the military had mandatory furloughs of lower-ranking personnel. Each one during Reagan's presidency was related to arguments over spending cuts. I don't have time to go over each and every one, but suffice it to say, Republicans wanted more from social programs and Democrats from the military. The last shutdown, though, was different. It had to do with the fairness doctrine that was upheld by the FCC and the Iran-Contra fiasco. The then democratically controlled Congress held the government captive to stop these issues. They kept the fairness doctrine in order to stop funding to the Contras. Under Bush Sr., there was a complete shutdown over the budget not including a deficit reduction package. Bush vetoed it, forcing the democratically controlled Congress to comply, but not without a 4-day shutdown because of the failing to reject the veto. In 1994, there was a resurgence of the control in Congress by the Republicans, often called the Republican Revolution. Clinton resisted their push for a balanced budget, which resulted in a 7-day complete shutdown. Clinton was forced to agree to a 7-year timetable on balancing the budget. Later that year, the government shut down because of differences in how to balance the budget. Newt Gingrich, the Speaker for the House at the time, held the government hostage to try to get the Republican numbers. The shutdown lasted for 22 days, all the way into 1996. Clinton was unreceptive and eventually won with his budgetary measures, which still balanced the budget, just not the way the Republicans had wished for. There is one more incident to remark upon before we get to this week. Back in 2011, there was a technical shutdown of 4 hours. The Congress worked until 3 in the morning to pass a bill that would continue the funding, but technically during that time the government was shut down, though nothing really happened. This was also caused by resistance to Obamacare. Now we get to the current one. We are in day 3 of another shutdown. This one is completely about the Obamacare bill, which is technically in effect, starting during this shutdown. Most governmental programs are still operating for the time being, but more and more of them will cease to be the longer this goes on. Currently, this is only a partial shutdown, but it will become a full one if it continues much further. If the history of these shutdowns show anything, it is that they are fairly inconsequential to the American people. Some people may experience temporary furloughs or a break in their welfare subsidies, but it is temporary. Everyone has to shoulder the burden of these political timeouts until some stopgap measure is reached. The issues are hardly ever resolved, and there will be more bloodletting to come. We just have to deal with no subsidies or national parks for a few days. Oh well. Doesn't stop local governments. So, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. By the way, watch the last video on the Equal Rights Amendment. I'll see you next time.